of when you think of Hooters? Hooters, the original American wing joint.
Come to Hooters where there's no...
The following program is produced by the AM First Radio Network and distributed by Global American Broadcasting, the GAB Radio Network.
Thank you for tuning in for this edition of Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali. I am attorney Zulu Ali with the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, Dr. Keel Bashir, and Andrea Rodeman. This week, like every week, we'll be discussing critical, legal, and social justice issues that are impacting our community. This week, our topic is going to be the criminalization of mental illness, and joining us in our discussion today, dropping in with us is a longtime friend of the show, Job Diop. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here, actually.
Thank you, Attorney Adi.
So anyway, I think that this is clearly an extremely a necessary show regarding the issue of mental illness in the criminal justice system. I kind of want to put it in perspective as far as the mental illness is concerned. In the United States, jails are the largest mental health providers, right? And jails are the largest mental health facilities, right? So there is a large number of individuals that actually are suffering from mental illness that are ultimately arrested and ultimately booked in or processed into our jail facilities. In fact, the numbers, depending on where you go, are anywhere from 50% to 75% of the individuals who are booked into jails and processed into jails are actually suffering from some sort of mental disorder or mental issue. So it's a huge problem. It's a serious problem, and it's one of those problems where unfortunately way too often we ignore, first of all, the stigma that is attached to the whole idea of having some sort of mental illness. Our society still treats individuals who are suffering from mental issues as taboo, or people who are they're ostracized because they may have some sort of emotional or mental problem. And I mean, and that's sad because for me, and I'll be the first individual to tell you that there was a time where I really didn't understand the whole idea or the significance of suffering from people suffering from mental disorders. In fact, many people who actually suffer from mental disorders are actually, there's problems with, just coming to terms with the fact that they may have a mental disorder. So, I mean, it's a huge, huge issue in our society. It's a huge, huge issue within our criminal justice system. And what we have done is we've just created, because we don't adequately deal with these individuals who come into contact with law enforcement the appropriate way, then ultimately we end up just using our jail facilities as a way to inadequately address these people who are actually suffering, from these issues. One of the things that I do know when it comes to the issue of poverty. Poverty actually is, in many ways, is the cause and also the consequence of mental issues. Because sometimes poverty, there's stressors associated with it, there's stigma and there's trauma that's associated with it, and especially when you're talking about children who grow up in poverty. And when you're actually a child who grows up in poverty, and that you're not getting, the appropriate emotional, and that's another issue, the way that we deal with issues of juveniles and children in our society, especially what we perceive to the whole process of dealing with so-called abused children.
Mhm.
And oftentimes the whole process of how the system comes in, how they process the system almost like it's a factory where individuals are, sent from home, like these group homes in this process to ultimately going into foster care. Oftentimes these I mean, all these things contribute as a young person, the mental health of young people. Ultimately, that person becomes a an adult that is suffering from mental problems,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so, um, and then not to mention, so now we're using the criminal justice system as a way of dealing with mental issues. And now what happened, which is the worst thing. In fact, in many cases, individuals actually develop mental problems or can develop mental problems within our institutions,
Mhm.
right? And so, because like everything else in this country, we tend to minimize, castigate, and oppress anything that we don't understand, then that's how we deal with things. And so, what happens is those who are have means actually use the appropriate mental health care facilities to deal with their problems. However, poor people, their mental issues are generally addressed in the criminal justice system. That's how they get that's how those things are actually addressed.
Resolve. Yes.
And so, I mean, it's a big issue. And not only that, I mean, even going as far as talking about when we talk about the patriotism and how much we love our veterans, there's many veterans who are suffering from PTSD who also aren't getting the appropriate mental health care. I mean, I've personally represented veterans who are suffering from PTSD to the extent that they may have almost a 100% on the PTSD, and they're not getting the appropriate care, or they're just putting them in jail.
Mhm.
And sometimes the judges won't even listen to you when you're dealing with these issues. And then you have police officers who don't know how to deal with the issue when they're dealing with people on the street. I think that, and these are really important issues. And I think one of the things in our society, and one of the things that I noticed is, the age of many of these of police officers. I know that, it's most of them get into start working when they're younger. And it's amazing what you don't know when you're 23, 24, 25 years old, or even 30 years old. You know, um, you don't know, so little. And so the way that they're taught to do, there is a paramilitary type of organization. Uh, and so, and so what happens is that you have individuals that are just so excited to put handcuffs on another individual, that they don't take these things into consideration because number one, they're not trained. And number two, they have no desire to deal with people who are suffering from mental illness. They did not become police officers to be social workers. They became police officers so they could play out, many of them play out their whole idea of arresting people and being, many of them, get into the profession not because they have empathy and sympathy, but more or less because they want to enforce, rules and regulations, and have the power that comes with it. The same thing exists for prosecutors. I mean, you have many prosecutors who suffer from the same thing. And many of these individuals suffer from, mental problems themselves, the way that they deal with it. I mean, you have prosecutors, it goes unrecognized, right? The way that police officers, you got police officers that have mental problems. They can play out those mental problems in a department and it will go completely unchecked and undiagnosed and unrecognized. The same thing happens for, prosecutors. There is a huge problem within our criminal justice system, from police officers to prosecutors to judges to, you know, corrections, when it comes to the system and the processes, and the system is like a machine, and it's a machine that's not taught to recognize issues and not taught to recognize individuals. And so oftentimes there's not even, when you think about, they don't really, at least from my perspective, um we have individuals who are attracted to this particular profession who are so diabolical in their mindset that the harm that they do to people within our society in many ways equals or exceeds what those who do deviant behaviors, or the conduct of people with deviant behaviors. It's kind of like a conflict of interest, to the extent that you have police officers who are sworn to protect the public. You have prosecutors who are sworn to protect the public. You have judges who are sworn to protect the public. And those individuals, when it comes to protecting the public, only seem to be only protecting certain segments of the public, because they become part of the problem of our society. And there is very little recognition in their minds, in their diabolical minds. They believe that what they're doing is right, but the reality of it is that many of them, I think, because they're so short-sighted, the fact that they entered into the profession at such young ages, you know um they are actually more of a problem than they are helping our
radio show but have no idea where to start? Or have you been hosting a podcast for a while and want to take it to the next level? If so, you need the Gab Radio Network. To host a show on the Gab Radio Network, all you need is your voice, and we'll handle the rest, from technical engineering to full-service audio production and much more. Every show on the Gab Radio Network can be heard on our station on the TuneIn Radio app. Plus, we put all of our shows on our satellite, which is accessed by over 5,500 stations. And here's the best part. You can host from anywhere you want. There are many means to connect to the Gab Radio Network remotely, and our staff of highly trained engineers and producers will make you sound like you're right here in studio. So, if you want to be on the Gab Radio Network, the same network that hosts the Small Business Advocate, Radio MD, and The Federalist, send an email right now to sales@gabradionetwork.com. That's sales@gabradionetwork.com.
Nubian Pictures presents a CCM Films production documentary entitled Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. This emotional and strong documentary tells the story of African-American lawyer Zulu Ali seeking justice and his purpose as a lawyer, while crossing paths with Araceli, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico who is seeking her freedom. Together, they help discover their purpose and freedom in each other. Watch this incredible film today from iTunes Movies, YouTube Movies, Amazon Prime, and Google Play Movies. Learn about the cast and crew, links to purchase, and more at purposeandfreedommovie.com. Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. Available now. Rated G.
I did not feel safe. That's why I decided to come to California, because I didn't feel safe in Mexico.
It's kind of like the system, and if you go outside the system, then it becomes a struggle.
Are you an immigrant seeking defense representation and are looking to protect your rights? Or maybe someone who is experiencing an injustice or discrimination and need a lawyer you can trust? Well, that's exactly why you need the help of award-winning trial lawyer Zulu Ali. The law offices of Zulu Ali provides immigration defense representation for those seeking justice and looking to protect their rights. If you or a loved one needs professional legal advice and representation, then contact Zulu Ali. Zulu Ali's firm focuses on criminal law, family law, civil and personal injury, and international law. Zulu Ali is a former police officer and U.S. Marine, so you know you're in good hands. Serving all of California and immigration cases nationwide, representing victims and suspects at the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Call Zulu Ali today at 888-682-3049 or visit ZuluAliLaw.com.
Welcome back to Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali and the Justice Watch crew, where we're continuing with our discussion on the criminalization of mental illness. again, I kind of want to go back to get there's a lot of like really um troubling statistics that come out of this whole issue of individuals who are suffering from mental illness and you know end up in the criminal justice system, not because of their because of there's intent, but the stigma that goes along with it. And when individuals get involved with issues surrounding the criminal justice system, oftentimes many people within the criminal justice system, especially the prosecutors, oftentimes take the position that these individuals are not being genuine and faking it. I've ran into that quite often where they think, well, the person's not really that bad. In fact, the way that and there's two issues in when we come into the criminal justice system as it relates to things as far as criminal acts are concerned. One is that there's the issue about whether the person has the capacity to to even stand trial. Like they're just completely mentally out of it. That's one thing. The second thing is whether the mental illness had anything to do with the crime that they're committing. The capacity to stand trial is the way that they do is they suspend criminal proceedings until that individual is able to actually stand trial. So a person, they could suspend criminal proceedings and put someone in mental in mental health within the jail facility until that individual is able to you know assist in their trial or able to stand trial, and that could be a very long period of time. And then once they're there, then they have to still answer for those charges. So then the problem is once you get in there, then what happens is that the jury, if you plead guilty by reason of insanity, saying that because of your mental illness that had an impact on why you committed the crime, then that goes to the jury. So then you got jury members acting as, social workers.
Right.
So why would a jury be the ones that would make that decision? I guess I would rather for the jury to make the decision than the judge, but it should probably be, and then what happens is when it comes to standing trial, it requires three, at least in many cases, you have to get, if you have one doctor that says you're competent and another doctor that says you're not competent, then, they're going to want a third evaluation because you're going to get a lot of pushback from the prosecutor's office about, whether the person is, you know, can stand trial or not. And that's how, we're dealing with this issue of mental illness. And I was, just going back to the whole idea is that, many of these people who end up, like juvenile delinquents, and we know that most juvenile delinquents come from backgrounds where there's significant amount, there's poverty. And the juvenile justice system, just like the just like the adult prisons, they create criminals.
Right.
They create, not, I'm not going to, criminal is not the right word, but they create individuals who suffer from mental illness. So if you take a young kid who made a mistake at school, and now you've labeled him a delinquent at such a young age, then the way you're dealing with him, you've castigated him so much that it impacts his social skills, his stressors, his trauma of just dealing with it. So now you've got a kid who acted up at school. We're treating him like like a criminal. We put him in some of these youth
Yeah,
facilities,
group
and in
homes
the
and
youth
stuff.
in the group homes, and oftentimes they experience trauma that even adds to it.
Right.
And then the next thing you know, you have a child who now is suffering from mental illness, and he just becomes an adult offender based solely on the fact that he has these mental problems.
Yes.
And we're not dealing with that. I mean, it's you know I'm just, I'm really, I struggle with trying to deal with the individuals within the criminal justice system. And the struggle is that there's so many individuals within the criminal justice system that actually uh scare me more than any criminal ever would. or ever could, because you have these individuals who are so cold-hearted,
Right.
and they're doing it because it's politics.
Yeah.
And then you have these judges who, have their own issues. And many of these judges, as I've said in this show before, a lot of times judges don't have the power you think they have. So what you do is you have an extremely aggressive district attorney who is an elected official who wants to keep his position, and who is oftentimes uh, judged by his ability to be tough on crime. A prosecutor who is known to be soft on crime oftentimes do not fare well, regardless of the political climate of the of the uh, of the district that he serves. So now you have this individual who's tough on crime. He's going to talk about, I got a 96, 98 conviction rate. He's going to make sure that once they charge somebody, that, my goal is to get a 100% conviction rate. My goal as a prosecutor is not to let people go. My goal is to make sure that I prosecute people who are charged with crimes. That's my job. My job is not to consider these individual circumstances. And then, oftentimes when you get into the system, there's people have priors. They've done other things. And oftentimes the reason why they already have a conviction is not because they're guilty, but because of the game that's played within the criminal justice system. You are forced to plead guilty in many different situations, just simply because of the way that it's structured. And so now that you've got this prosecutor who has, his associates or assistant district attorneys who basically are nothing more than just basically the minions for the prosecutor. And so now, you have situations where judges oftentimes have to kowtow to the prosecutors, because judges who go against who has problems and odds with prosecutors, or do not allow themselves with prosecutors, oftentimes have problems because they're running for office. So now they have to run for office, and oftentimes prosecutors will either find someone to help unseat the judge or make things difficult for the judge. So I mean, it's a very troubling situation, because you cannot address the crime that's happening in the streets until you address the crime that is happening in the courtrooms. That's right. You cannot. I mean, if the criminal justice system and the prosecutors that we have, and I'm going to say this, many prosecutors are good. There's some good prosecutors out there, but the problem is that most there's another mental problem, and the mental problem is that people with inferiority complexes tend to gravitate towards being police officers and being prosecutors. They gravitate to that because it's the power that attracts them to the job, not the job itself. And so now when you have good prosecutors, it's a lot easier. They're a lot more lenient because they don't have inferiority complexes. So you can deal with those individuals. But many people, and it goes across the whole spectrum of race and gender, don't think that because you have a woman prosecutor who is going to be soft, because many times women prosecutors are more harsh and more unfair than men. Don't think because you're an immigrant, because immigrant prosecutors can be worse than some white male prosecutors. In fact, if I'm going to be completely honest, the fairest prosecutors that I've ever dealt with were white males, and some of the most unfair happen to be immigrant female prosecutors. So, that's, and I'm not saying that as to paint a brush against all of them. I'm just saying that your experiences sometimes make you worse. But at any rate, please do not touch that dial. We'll be back on the other side of the break.
There's a new nationally syndicated radio program that's sweeping the nation, and you don't want to miss it. Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali, the voice of justice for the people. The focus of Justice Watch is to provide an honest analysis and viable solutions to the criminal and social justice crisis in America and the world from a Black, brown, working class, and socially disadvantaged perspective, and to motivate listeners to be informed and part of the solution. Zulu Ali is joined by the Justice Crew, consisting of Rosa Nunez, Michael Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Charito Ali to tackle the most pressing issues. Host Attorney Zulu Ali is a former police officer, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and an award-winning trial lawyer who focuses on representing persons accused of crimes, immigrants, victims of discrimination, and persons seeking civil justice. Find out how to listen to Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali at justicewatchradio.com. Nubian Pictures presents a CCM Films production documentary entitled Purpose and Freedom. Keep Your Hand on the Plow. This emotional and strong documentary tells the story of African-American lawyer Zulu Ali seeking justice and his purpose as a lawyer while crossing paths with Araceli, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico who is seeking her freedom. Together, they help discover their purpose and freedom in each other. Watch this incredible film today from iTunes Movies, YouTube Movies, Amazon Prime, and Google Play Movies. Learn about the cast and crew, links to purchase, and more at purposeandfreedommovie.com. Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. Available now. Rated G.
I did not feel safe. That's why I decided to come to California, because I didn't feel safe in Mexico.
It's kind of like the system, and if you go outside the system, then it becomes a struggle.
Are you an immigrant seeking defense representation and are looking to protect your rights? Or maybe someone who is experiencing an injustice or discrimination and need a lawyer you can trust? Well, that's exactly why you need the help of award-winning trial lawyer Zulu Ali. The law offices of Zulu Ali provides immigration defense representation for those seeking justice and looking to protect their rights. If you or a loved one needs professional legal advice and representation, then contact Zulu Ali. Zulu Ali's firm focuses on criminal law, family law, civil and personal injury, and international law. Zulu Ali is a former police officer and U.S. Marine, so you know you're in good hands. Serving all of California and immigration cases nationwide, representing victims and suspects at the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Call Zulu Ali today at 888-682-3049 or visit ZuluAliLaw.com.
Welcome back to Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali and the Justice Watch crew, where we're continuing with our discussion on the criminalization of mental illness. So anyway, I'm going to talk to, I guess I'm going to go to you first, Job, and kind of get your input as far as the whole idea of the criminalization of mental illness from your perspective.
All right. Thank you so much, Attorney Zulu Ali. I think I'm just going to talk about the solution, the probable solution that we could be using to solve this problem. I work in, before I used to work in the state prison in California as a nurse. And what I've noticed is I give more mental health medication to the inmates than even pain medication, than medication that help a problem. Because many of these problems that they have, like the sleeping problem, all these disorder that they develop in state prison, are the consequences of them not even sleeping, not even dealing with their peers in prison. So they suffer not only inside the prison, but the disease is destroying them inside, because they don't have like the technicians that they need to help them to feel like they can live their jail time like in peace. So
you're saying that basically because of them being in jail themselves, the whole trauma of just the experience of being in jail requires them to be go through, I guess,
through some program,
through programs or to be medicated in
yes,
order just to get through the whole idea.
Exactly. They use more medication to make them sleep, to make them calm down, than just curing the disorder itself.
And you know what's interesting, and now that you bring up the whole idea of medication, it also goes back to the issue of why we have such a big drug problem in our
Yes.
Right.
country.
Mhm.
I mean, we are a country that is, I mean, everybody is medicated.
Yes.
I mean, we have people, whether you're talking about, you know, now we got this big thing with prescription drugs. I
Mhm.
mean, people are paying attention to prescription drugs because of the communities that impacts, which is not our community. Like they
Mhm.
didn't pay any attention during the crack epidemic.
Right.
Mhm.
But now, because of prescription drugs, you have a lot of people who are dealing with that and they get hooked on those drugs.
Yes.
You have the issue of other drugs, not prescription, but non prescription controlled substances, right?
Mhm.
We have a society that really has always played into putting drugs on. We promote self medication.
Medication.
Mhm.
Don't
Yes.
think for one second that there was a war on drugs. There was not a war on drugs. There was a
Right.
war on black people,
Mhm.
and drugs was part of that war. It
Mhm.
was used as an excuse, right?
Mhm.
Then you have this whole issue, and we're talking about unlawful drugs, and then we have the whole issue of alcohol.
Mhm.
I mean, we have a liquor store on every
Every
corner,
corner.
Mhm.
Yes.
so we're full of people who are self-medicating themselves because we are living in a society that creates so much trauma that we have to have it. I mean, I'm sure that, and we're talking about police officers. There's serious alcoholism in law
Yes.
enforcement.
Mhm.
There's serious alcoholism within the legal profession.
Mhm.
Period.
Mhm.
Um, so we're self-medicating in many ways, and that's the way we many people deal
Mhm.
with their issues. I
Yes.
mean, the stresses of those. I mean, can you imagine how many judges indulge in alcohol and believe that as long as they have a designated driver, that makes it okay?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Or the fact that you have prosecutors who go to prosecutor
Mhm.
parties
Mhm.
and they are all getting drunk.
Mhm.
I'm not saying them all. I'm putting a scenario out there,
Mhm.
and they're getting intoxicated. It's the same thing. You're self-medicating because of the pressures. Why would you need to become intoxicated?
Yeah.
Well, you have to ask yourself that question.
Right.
What promotes the need to be intoxicated? And we in this country begin to become intoxicated at a very early age.
Mhm.
We have those, it's glamorized.
Mhm.
Yes.
I mean, whether you're talking about going to the bar and drinking alcohol, or going to the game and drinking alcohol,
Mhm.
or which is a gateway to many other things.
Mhm.
Although this is not a show about drugs, but I believe they go hand in hand.
Yes.
Yes.
And so we don't, although we're not recognizing that we have these mental health problems, but we are a country that is obsessed with self-medicating, whether
Mhm.
it's something legal or not, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those
Mhm.
medication doesn't cure the problem. It just slow down
Yeah.
the process. So
Right.
when they get out, they're just gonna repeat the same crime just to come back because they develop tolerance to the point that when they go to the street, they're gonna be using drugs, alcohol, or anything just
W-
to get to the same level they
and
were
but
getting.
I'm talking about not just individuals who are basically just, well, yeah, that obviously individuals
Mhm.
who are subjected to the criminal justice system,
Mhm.
but our society in
In
general,
That's
general,
true.
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Mhm.
Well, this is a subject that is really close to my heart because in my family, that runs in my family,
Hmm.
mental illness. And I've seen, like, first, my brother is
Hmm.
mentally ill, and I've seen him progress to where he's at now. And it started with uh, issues with his dad. He started messing with drugs, weed, and then weed went to something else. And then he started um, doing things that were illegal.
Hmm.
And now he's in and out of jail. And when he goes and he comes home, they've pumped him with so much medication in jail that he's 100% not himself. And it's unfortunate that in the legal system that's not addressed. I don't believe that jail helps people who are mentally ill.
Hmm.
I think it actually hurts.
Right.
I do believe that unless you're like severely mentally ill, where you're just completely incapable of representing yourself, it's not taken serious. So if you go in there and you have bipolarism or you're manic depressant or schizophrenic, it's not really that big of a deal unless you're in there and you're just like, you have to be completely insane for them to say, okay, no, this is a problem, and that's the unfortunate part. I don't know what the answer is. I know that it is a huge problem and it's just going to create a bigger issue if that's not dealt with. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that the problem is huge.
Well, I mean, you have to look at it this way too. I mean, the United States has the largest prison population in the developed world,
Right.
that far exceeds any other place.
Yeah.
Now you have to, why is it, and a higher, very high crime rate.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, it's a look in the mirror time. How can you really ask yourself this question? Why are you saying that you're the greatest nation in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Ask yourself, would that has to play into that analysis. So there's no really answering of that question. People within the criminal justice system aren't going to answer that question.
Right.
So in other words, if I go to a prosecutor and I say, hey, why is it, or at least a prosecutor that may have an inferiority complex,
there you go,
and say, why is it that America has such a high prison population and such a high, violent crime rate? What are they going to say? If they're being honest, because most of them are probably ignorant to it anyway, to be quite honest with you, if they have an inferiority complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about those with the inferiority complex. I'm talking to you. Yes, you. You're ignorant to it anyway. You're probably thinking in your mind the reason why is because we have black people in the country.
Oh yeah.
Or because we have brown people in the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
that's probably what they're thinking,
mm-hmm.
right? Now, if I was to ask a prosecutor who does not have an inferiority complex, why? They're going to say, because we have a broken system.
Right.
Because it is broken. If there is nothing it's nothing to brag about, right? That you have more violence, have a higher prison system, and probably have more people dealing with mental problems than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And much of that is clearly because we're a society that has yet to address our demons.
Yes.
So our society is reflective of the demons that we have, right? And the demons that we have is that we have yet to address much of the trauma. I mean, we began this nation by traumatizing people.
Yeah.
So when you have a nation that comes into existence by traumatizing the indigenous people and have centuries of traumatizing human beings by the way that you treated them, then how are you to expect that unless you address that issue, that you're going to have a society that is going to be free of eventually the prison, eventually that, and not to mention, look at during the Trump administration and the people and some of his followers,
mm-hmm.
and like, bum rushing the Capitol,
Mm-hmm.
Do we really believe that these are individuals that are rational thinking people who are not suffering from mental illness, that are desecrating on flags and desecrating on people's desks and in a so-called sacred house?
Radio program that's sweeping the nation, and you don't want to miss it. Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali, the voice of justice for the people. The focus of Justice Watch is to provide an honest analysis and viable solutions to the criminal and social justice crisis in America and the world from a Black, brown, working class, and socially disadvantaged perspective, and to motivate listeners to be informed and part of the solution. Zulu Ali is joined by the Justice Crew, consisting of Rosa Nunez, Michael Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Charito Ali to tackle the most pressing issues. Host Attorney Zulu Ali is a former police officer, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and an award-winning trial lawyer who focuses on representing persons accused of crimes, immigrants, victims of discrimination, and persons seeking civil justice. Find out how to listen to Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali at justicewatchradio.com. Nubian Pictures presents a CCM Films production documentary entitled Purpose and Freedom. Keep Your Hand on the Plow. This emotional and strong documentary tells the story of African-American lawyer Zulu Ali seeking justice and his purpose as a lawyer while crossing paths with Araceli, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico who is seeking her freedom. Together, they help discover their purpose and freedom in each other. Watch this incredible film today from iTunes Movies, YouTube Movies, Amazon Prime, and Google Play Movies. Learn about the cast and crew, links to purchase, and more at purposeandfreedommovie.com. Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. Available now. Rated G.
I did not feel safe. That's why I decided to come to California, because I didn't feel safe in Mexico.
It's kind of like the system, and if you go outside the system, then it becomes a struggle.
Are you an immigrant seeking defense representation and are looking to protect your rights? Or maybe someone who is experiencing an injustice or discrimination and need a lawyer you can trust? Well, that's exactly why you need the help of award-winning trial lawyer Zulu Ali. The law offices of Zulu Ali provides immigration defense representation for those seeking justice and looking to protect their rights. If you or a loved one needs professional legal advice and representation, then contact Zulu Ali. Zulu Ali's firm focuses on criminal law, family law, civil and personal injury, and international law. Zulu Ali is a former police officer and U.S. Marine, so you know you're in good hands, serving all of California and immigration cases nationwide, representing victims and suspects at the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Call Zulu Ali today at 888-682-3049 or visit ZuluAliLaw.com.
Welcome back to Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali and the Justice Watch crew, where we're continuing with our discussion on the criminalization of the criminal justice system. So I guess I can start with something that you said. I'm going to start with you because I know you said that basically you asked me a question. Is the system, what was that question?
I said, is the system really broken, or is it operating exactly the way that it was designed to from the beginning?
What's the answer to that question? Huh?
Yes.
Which one? Yes to which one?
I mean, I really believe if the government wanted to resolve this problem, they would do it long time ago. It's because this problem is affecting the minority. For example, when you go to prison, the 12% of African American can populate up to 80% some prison or jails. They either Hispanic or they black. And when you combine the black and the Hispanic, they turn around 30%, but yet they populate up to 90% of some jail of and prison. That would tell you that the most inmate with mental illness come from those category. So there is no rush, because those are the one the police officers target. Those are the one the judges targets. Those are the one the prosecution target. So when they mentally ill and then they stay in prison, then it's fine, because the goal, the ultimate goal, is to take them off the street. So there is no rush to solve the problem.
Where are we at?
I agree.
I mean, I think that there clearly it's a matter of it being a it clearly operates the way it's supposed to. I mean, I think that, you know, there is a clearly a concerted effort to make sure that certain segments of the country are subjected to, you know, the enforcement of the laws.
Yes.
It's always been that way.
Mhm.
And I think that sometimes we do want to focus on doing what we need to do to address what's going wrong in our own communities and some of the trauma that's happening within our own communities, and try to, and I don't want to say this to discourage anyone, because I think that there's two things that I want to say about this issue. Number one is I want to be clear that I don't want to discourage anyone about trying to do what needs to be done within our own communities.
Mhm.
But there has definitely been a concerted effort that every time that we've attempted, I mean, we can look at Rosewood, we can look at Black Wall Street, we can look at many situations where uh, there's been an attempt to create thriving predominantly black communities. There has been a effort to destroy those efforts,
Right.
Mhm.
and there's no question about that. But on the other hand, what may create solace in some people, but clearly within my mind, is that I truly understand that the reason why that black people and some brown people are targeted is because of a psychosis that these individuals are suffering from.
Mhm.
And it is what is called retributive psychosis. These individuals are so scared that they will be the subject, or
Mm.
that these people will do to us
Mhm.
what we did to
Yes.
them.
Yes.
And that is a fear of many people within the system. The whole idea of creating many of these laws was based solely on that. Many of the slave patrols were there because they were fearful not only of them running away, but of what they may, because they may, come back and go after the slave master. And today, there's that fear. There is a concerted effort that's the reason why the country is plagued with this issue of such a high prison rate, because they have to maintain that level of incarceration, and they have to keep their thumb on these individuals to make sure that they do not end up doing something to the people. I mean, there has to be a degree of paranoia
Mhm.
within a large number of people, especially the people in power.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we also have to understand that there has always been this concerted effort to create chaos among common folk, whether, regardless of those who are on the lower part of the social economic scale.
Right.
But there's definitely but you can control certain individuals by making them hate other individuals.
Mhm.
And that's part of really what's happening and has happened in our society.
Mhm.
I mean, it is clearly an issue, and clearly a problem, here in America. So then, if we go to the issue about how do we treat this issue? What do we do as a society, knowing that as a society, uh, I don't believe it's going to happen. I don't believe that we're going to do. I mean, we too often see, they're more interested in protecting themselves. Like when there's a clearly an unlawful police shooting,
Mhm.
and you file a lawsuit against the police department, they go out and they hire a private law firm to protect them. And you go through the litigation process in a manner in which is going to minimize their uh, liability. They're not concerned about the death or the person who was shot or mistreated. They're concerned about the fact that if all they had to do was give you an apology, then it would be very easy.
Mhm.
But the whole idea is they're putting, they put very little value on certain individuals' lives.
Yeah.
So it becomes a process of litigation and protecting it. And everybody is expected to be held accountable for the things that they do wrong, except the people within the criminal justice system, because they're absolutely not being held accountable for the things that they do wrong. I've not yet to see, but maybe on one or two occasions, that any prosecutor involved in prosecuting somebody wrongfully ever really paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they do, and oftentimes they still keep their job and they give that person money if they give them any money. The same thing with police officers. They all of a sudden, when a police officer does something that he's not supposed to, then basically they distance themselves from that officer. But forget the fact that you've allowed that person to. This is the same thing in the Derek Chauvin case.
Mm-hmm.
I'm extremely upset with the fact that the police chief testified against Derek Chauvin
Right.
and tried to act like Derek Chauvin was the devil. You knew he was a devil the whole time he was there.
Exactly.
You know, you were the really part of the problem. In fact, you should have been the one that was getting prosecuted. Derek Chauvin should have been the one that they sent to mental institution.
Absolutely.
Because you knew what was going on. The mayor, everybody down the line should have got it when that happened. But everybody distanced themselves from that one person. And it wasn't that one person or those few officers that were there. It was the entire power structure and institution of the criminal justice system.
Exactly.
Everybody, every prosecutor that prosecuted the case he was involved in, every judge that allowed him to do what he did in their courtroom and preliminary hearings and everything else, or trials, every one of them should have got it.
You're right.
You know, and that's the problem. It is their entire fault. You are part of that problem. You're not part of the solution to what's going on in this country. And it's time for us to wake up and understand that.
That's right.
Absolutely.
But at any rate, thank you for tuning in for this edition of Justice Watch. We'll see you next week, same time, same place, same channel.
New nationally syndicated radio program that's sweeping the nation, and you don't want to miss it. Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali, the voice of justice for the people. The focus of Justice Watch is to provide an honest analysis and viable solutions to the criminal and social justice crisis in America and the world from a black, brown, working class, and socially disadvantaged perspective, and to motivate listeners to be informed and part of the solution. Zulu Ali is joined by the Justice Crew, consisting of Rosa Nunez, Michael Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Charito Ali to tackle the most pressing issues. Host attorney Zulu Ali is a former police officer, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and an award-winning trial lawyer who focuses on representing persons accused of crimes, immigrants, victims of discrimination, and persons seeking civil justice. Find out how to listen to Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali at justicewatchradio.com.
KCAA Loma Linda, 10